Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh's Sabbath day. Greetings to those on the internet or those that might be watching live. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out. Today's message is entitled Staying Unmixed. And it was an interesting verse in Matthew chapter 10 that actually inspired this. And a surprising translation of this verse. But today I just want to discuss not being mixed with falsehood, not being mixed with error, not being mixed with sin, leaven, and how to protect ourselves from that. In Matthew chapter 10, and I'm going to read I'm going to back it up just a little bit. Verse 16. Chapter 10, verse 16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. This word harmless literally means unmixed. If you go back to the Greek word, it's 185 in Strong's, and it literally means unmixed. Well, a dove is unmixed with evil, which is why some translations render it as harmless or innocent. But being unmixed with evil would also be a good translation. And while I was meditating on being unmixed, a verse came to mind. Evil communications corrupts good manners. And many people quote that. I've quoted numerous times concerning, associating with bad behavior. But I went back and dug a little deeper into that. That's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It's interesting what happens when you just go back and dig a little deeper and see what you find. In 1 Corinthians 15, although I have quoted that verse many times, I'm quoting part B of the verse. And there's a part A. And part A is don't be deceived. And if you dig a little deeper into that, it's don't be led astray. Don't be led astray. And I wrote down a few other translations of the rest of the verse. Don't be led astray, evil company, evil companionships, corrupt good morals, good manners, or good habits. Our associations can corrupt our habits and our morals. But I dug a little deeper into that. The context of actually what's going on here. Why did Paul even say it to start with? So I want to back it up to verse 13. Verse 13 of chapter 15. But if there be no resurrection of the dead, then is Messiah not risen? And if Messiah be not risen, then is our preaching vain, and your faith is also vain. Yea, and we are found false witnesses of Elohim, because we have testified of Elohim that he raised up Messiah, whom he raised not up, if so be that the dead rise not. For if the dead rise not, then is not Messiah raised. And if Messiah be not raised, your faith is vain, and are yet in your sins. Then they also which are fallen asleep in Messiah are perished. If in this life only we have hope in Messiah, we are of all men most miserable. So the context of what he's leading up to is there has to be a resurrection. If there wasn't a resurrection, if Messiah hasn't been raised, we're wasting our time. And we're false witnesses going around spreading a false message if this truly hasn't happened. Okay. Verse 20. But now is Messiah risen from the dead, and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Messiah shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order, Messiah the first fruits, afterwards they that are the Messiahs at his coming. Then comes the end. This is a very deep chapter here, which I didn't intend, but I'm going to go ahead and let it flow all the way through. But every man in his own order, Messiah the first fruits, afterwards they that are the Messiahs at his coming. Then comes the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to Yahweh, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power, for he must reign, Yeshua, till he hath put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. For he that hath put all things under his feet. But when he saith all things are put under him, it is manifested that he is accepted, which did put all things under his feet. Now, interesting history on this verse here. Way back when, I thought that meant that Yahweh is accepted, like he is, they accept him. But somebody corrected me on that, a sister in here. And what this verse is actually saying is Yahshua has been put in control until he puts down all of his enemies. And when that takes place, he presents the kingdom to his Father, but his Father is the exception to the submission, meaning everything is subdued to the Son except the Father. The Father is not submissive to the Son. Verse 28, which this is a very, very good, and I know this is kind of off on a different path, but this is a very good set of verses here to explain the order between Father and Son. And especially for people who are confused as to the identity of the Father and Son. It's very plain here. But anyway, next verse. And when all things shall be subdued unto him, the Son, then shall the Son also himself be submissive unto him that put all things under him, that Yahweh may be all in all. Else, what else shall they do which are baptized for the dead? If the dead rise not at all, why are they then baptized for the dead? And why stand we in jeopardy every hour? Jeopardy here means we're in danger all the time. Why are we, if there is no resurrection, if the Messiah was not raised, then why are we putting ourselves in danger all the time? Think about that. If this was a lie, some people actually, they think that this is a bunch of fairy tales and endless fruitless debates. But these writers here put themselves under persecution and in jeopardy all the time. And why would they do that if it wasn't true, if they didn't believe it with all their hearts? Verse 31, I protest by your rejoicing which I have in Messiah Yeshua our Master, I die daily. If after the manner of men I have fought with beasts at Ephesus, what advantage it me? If the dead rise not, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. That verse right there is, let's live how we want to. We're going to die tomorrow anyway. And then the very next verse is where we started. Don't be led astray. By who? By the people that say, let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. That behavior, that corruption can corrupt you. Don't be led astray. Evil communications corrupts good manners. I found something else that was a little interesting about verse 32 here. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die, is found in Isaiah chapter 22. Isaiah chapter 22, starting in verse 12. And in that day did my sovereign Yahweh of hosts call to weeping, and to mourning, and to baldness, and to girding with sackcloth. And behold, joy and gladness, slaying oxen, and killing sheep, eating flesh, and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. And it was revealed in mine ears by Yahweh of hosts, surely this iniquity shall not be purged from you till you die, saith my sovereign Yahweh of hosts. Thought it was interesting that he was looking for weeping and mourning, baldness, and girding with sackcloth, but they were celebrating, we're going to die anyway. Concerning not being mixed, not being corrupted by the world around us, I think the first line of defense for Yahweh's people starts at home. And some have been blessed with homes to be raised with the knowledge of Torah and Yahweh and Yeshua, but there's a lot of broken homes out there, and that's exactly what they're missing. They're missing Yahweh's word, man. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 1. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which Yahweh your Elohim commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess it, that thou mightest fear Yahweh thy Elohim, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, that thy days may be prolonged. You, your son, your son's sons, all the days of your life, that your days may be prolonged. His commandments add days. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahweh Elohim of thy fathers hath promised thee in the land that floweth with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim is one Yahweh, and thou shalt love Yahweh thy Elohim with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up, and shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. So here we see that the lives of his people should be saturated with his word, and it should be taught to the children and the children's children. Let's look at chapter 7 of Deuteronomy, starting in verse 1. And we see how separate he wants his people to be. When Yahweh thy Elohim shall bring thee into the land, whither thou go to possess it, and hast cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when Yahweh thy Elohim shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. Why? For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other mighty ones. So will the anger of Yahweh be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. Thus you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art an holy people. Holy meaning sanctified, set apart. And I'm sure we can make a pretty good connection with unmixed. You are an unmixed people. You're pure. Called to be pure. Called to be holy. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 gives us an illustration of not mixing. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 1, it is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much named amongst the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. And you are puffed up, and have not rather mourned that he that hath done this deed might be taken away from among you. For I verily, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have judged already, as though I were present, concerning him that hath so done this deed. In the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah, when you are gathered together, and my spirit with the power of our Master Yeshua Messiah, to deliver such an one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Master Yeshua. Your glorying is not good. Know you not that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? And that has that tone of evil communications, corrupts good manners. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are unleavened, for even Messiah our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must you needs go out of the world. He's saying, I've told you before not to keep company with these type of people, but let me clarify what I mean. Verse 11. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner. With such an one know not to eat. And it would seem that with the context of what he's written here about the keeping the feast, not with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth, and not eating with this brother, it would seem that this is a time of feast keeping, and whoever this is needs to examine themselves before they take of the bread and the wine. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, I want to read a few verses about our protection against mixing. How do we protect ourselves from mixing? In verse 18, it says, flee fornication. Every sin that a man does is without the body, but he that commits fornication sins against his own body. When I read that flee, I thought of Joseph taking off, and the woman grabbed his coat. He was fleeing from that. Chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians, starting in verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock, and followed them, and that rock was Messiah. But with many of them Yahweh was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us tempt Messiah, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now, he's going through some history here and saying that these are examples of what we should not do. Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples or examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world have come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he stands take heed lest he fall. If you think you're standing firm, be careful, take heed. There's another verse that reminds me of. It says, if a brother is caught in a fault, let those who are spiritual restore such a one, except consider himself, lest he also be tempted. I believe that's in Galatians. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But Elohim is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. Wasn't that in a song earlier? Yeah, the way to escape. There hath no temptation, next verse. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. A few minutes ago we read, flee from fornication. This says, flee from idolatry. Ephesians chapter 4. And verse 24. And that you put on the new man, which after Elohim is created in righteousness and true holiness, set apartness. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Another translation says, don't give the devil a place to work. Don't give him the opportunity to work. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. First Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 19. Quench not the spirit, despise not prophesying. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good, abstain from the appearance of evil. That's how you protect yourself from being unmixed. Abstain, stay away from something that even appears to be sinful or evil. Flee from those things. James chapter 4. Now we just read about fleeing from these things. This is how you get the devil to flee. James chapter 4 and verse 7 says, submit yourselves therefore to Elohim, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. But don't forget to submit to Yahweh first. Submit to him, then resist the devil, and he will flee. John chapter 3. John chapter 3, starting in verse 14. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For Yahweh sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of Yahweh. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that does evil hates the light, neither comes to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that does truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be manifest, that they are wrought in Elohim. So here we see men loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And those that were doing evil, they don't want to come to the light. They hate the light because of their deeds. The light manifests their darkness, their deeds. Now check this out. Matthew chapter 5. So we see that their works were darkness and that they didn't want to come to the light. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Your good works are your light. Darkness does not want to come to the light. So if you want to keep darkness at bay, let your light shine. Let your good works, let the word of Yahweh come out of your mouth, and darkness will flee from you. It does not want to be in the presence of light. So how do we protect ourselves from being mixed with darkness? Let your light shine. Let the light come out of your mouth, and darkness, the devil, will flee from you. And that's part of that submitting. If you submit to Yahweh, then resist the devil, he'll flee, because if you're truly submitting, you're walking in the light. And where do we find this light? Where do we find this good works? All you got to do is keep reading. Think not that I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of the least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. What commandments? The commandments that are found in the law and the prophets. That is the light. And the devil hates it. Darkness. Oh my goodness. And he's out there in the mainstream churches teaching them that the light is dark. The devil is in the mainstream churches teaching the masses that the light of Yahweh is dark. Woe unto those that call evil good and good evil. But whoever breaks the commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. John 17. I'll be closing out here in just a minute. John 17. Starting in verse 14. This is Yeshua praying to his Father. Another good chapter to understand the relationship between the Father and the Son. In verse 14 he says, I have given them thy word. Why? Because he was that prophet that came with the word of Yahweh in his mouth. I have given them thy word, and the world has hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that they should be taken out of the world. That ties in with 1 Corinthians chapter 5. But that thou should keep them from the evil. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. Set them apart, make them holy, keep them unmixed through thy truth. Thy word is truth. John chapter 8, verse 31. Then said Yeshua to those Jews which believed on him, if you continue in my word. Well, whose word was it? My word is not my own, but his that sent me. The words that I speak what I'm commanded to speak from the Father. So if you continue on my word, you'll know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you shall be made free? Yeshua answered them, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever commits sin is a slave of sin. Knowing Yahweh's word, the same word we've been talking about here, is what sets you free from a life of sin, because Yahweh's word identifies sin. Yahweh's light identifies darkness. Darkness doesn't want to come to the light, Yahweh's word, because Yahweh's word reveals the darkness. It reveals the works, and the opposite of dark works is found in the light, and it's found in his instructions. So it starts at home. The children need to be taught the light of Yahweh. It needs to be passed down from generation to generation. And if anyone comes along and tells you that you're not supposed to walk in this light, do not be deceived. Do not be drawn away, because the enemy is trying to mix you. Hallelujah.